Captain Jake Morrison stood in the center of the great hall, his hands clasped behind his back as he looked up at the 12 seats that surrounded him. Each seat held a different alien being, and each one looked down at him like he was some kind of insect that had wandered into their meeting by mistake. The hall was huge and made of some kind of crystal that caught the light from the stars outside. Everything about this place was meant to make visitors feel small. The ceiling stretched up so high that Jake could barely see it. The walls curved around him in a perfect circle, and the alien council members sat in their raised chairs like judges deciding the fate of a criminal dot. Jake had been standing here for 3 hours now, waiting for them to finish talking among themselves, in languages that sounded like nothing he had ever heard before. Some made clicking sounds, others hummed in frequencies that made his teeth ache, and one seemed to communicate through flashes of colored light that hurt to look at directly. Lieutenant Amy Parker stood beside him, holding a tablet that contained 3 months of work, charts, graphs, population data, resource requirements, and detailed plans for human colonies in the empty systems beyond the galactic rim. They had prepared for every possible question, anticipated every concern, and practiced their presentation until they could give it in their sleep. But the aliens had barely looked at any of it. Dr. Being in the center chair finally stopped making his strange hissing sounds and turned his yellow eyes toward Jake. This was Chancellor Zekdal, the leader of the Galactic Council. He looked like a giant lizard that had learned to walk on 2 legs with scales that shifted from green to brown depending on how the light hit them. His neck was long and flexible, allowing him to turn his head in ways that made Jake's stomach turn. "Human Morrison," the Chancellor said, his voice coming through a small device that translated his words into English. "We have considered your request." Jake felt a small spark of hope. Maybe all the waiting had been worth it. Maybe they would finally get the chance to prove that humans belonged among the stars. "Your species wishes to establish colonies in the Outer Rim territories," the Chancellor continued. "You claim that your home world is becoming crowded and that you need new places for your people to live." "That's correct, Chancellor," Jake replied. "Earth's population has reached 12 billion. We've managed our resources well, but we need room to grow. The systems we've identified are uninhabited and contain worlds that could support human life with minimal terraforming." The creature in the chair to the Chancellor's right made a sound like grinding metal. This was the representative from the Hive Worlds, Queen Zerish. She looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a spider, with 6 arms and eyes that never seemed to blink. When she spoke, the translation device made her voice sound like wind through dry leaves. "Minimal terraforming," she said, and Jake could hear the mockery in her translated voice. "Your species has existed for what, 200,000 years? You have been in space for less than 300. You think you understand terraforming?" Amy stepped forward slightly, her tablet ready. "We've successfully terraformed Mars and established colonies on 17 worlds within our own system. Our atmospheric processors can transform a dead world into a garden in 50 years. 50 years, rumbled the being from the third chair. This one was made of living crystal, its body shifting and changing color as it spoke. "We have been terraforming worlds for 50,000 years. What you call success, we call crude experimentation." Jake kept his face calm, but inside he was starting to feel the familiar burn of frustration. They had come here following every protocol, showing respect for customs that seemed designed to waste time and being as polite as possible. But everything they said was met with condescension. "We're not claiming to be experts," Jake said carefully. "We're asking for the chance to learn and grow. Humanity has always been willing to work with others to share knowledge and resources." "Share knowledge," the Chancellor repeated, and Jake was pretty sure the lizard was laughing at him. "What knowledge could you possibly have that would interest us? You have barely discovered quantum mechanics. Your fastest ships take months to travel between stars. Your medicine cannot even prevent your people from aging and dying. We may not be as advanced as you," Amy said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "but we've contributed to galactic civilization. Our musicians have performed in concerts across 12 systems. Our doctors have developed new treatments for diseases that affect multiple species. Our farmers have created crops that can grow in environments previously thought uninhabitable." The energy being in the fourth chair flickered brighter for a moment, which the translation system interpreted as laughter, music, and farming. It said in a voice like static electricity, "How charming! Perhaps when you have unlocked the secrets of dimensional travel and learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, we can discuss your contributions to civilization." Jake felt his jaw clench. 3 months of meetings, 3 months of jumping through hoops, 3 months of being polite to beings who treated humans like amusing pets, and this was what it came down to. They weren't being judged on their potential or their character. They were being dismissed because they were young. "How old was your species when you were granted territory?" Jake asked the Chancellor. "How advanced were you when the Council first recognized your right to expand?" The yellow eyes narrowed. "We do not discuss the private affairs of Council members with outsiders." "Outsiders?" Jake repeated. "Is that what we are? After 3 months of following your protocols, respecting your customs, and presenting our case according to your rules, you are petitioners," the Chancellor said coldly. "Nothing more. And your petition has been reviewed and found wanting." The formal rejection came swift and unanimous. 12 voices, some speaking in clicks and hisses, others in mathematical formulas translated into sound, all saying the same thing. No, humanity was too young, too primitive, too dangerous to be trusted. "With new worlds, perhaps in a few thousand years," the Chancellor said, "when your species has matured and learned proper respect for your betters, we might consider granting you junior membership in galactic society. Until then, you should be content with your small corner of the galaxy." Jake looked around the circle of alien faces, seeing the same expression on each of them. Not hatred or fear, but something worse. Boredom. They were bored by humanity, dismissive of human potential, convinced that they knew everything there was to know about what humans could accomplish. "We came here in good faith," Jake said quietly. "We followed your rules, respected your traditions, and asked for nothing more than the chance to grow. We offered friendship and partnership, and you have been given an answer." The Chancellor replied, "Learn to accept it with grace." Jake nodded slowly, then turned to Amy. "Pack it up, Lieutenant. We're done here." As they gathered their materials, Jake could hear the council members already moving on to other business, their attention shifting to matters they considered more important than the fate of 12 billion human beings. He and Amy walked toward the exit, their footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. At the doorway, Jake stopped and turned back. The aliens were no longer paying attention to them, discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes in their various languages. For a moment, he considered saying something dramatic, making some grand statement about how they would regret this decision. Instead, he simply said, "We won't ask again." None of them seemed to hear him, or if they did, they didn't care. As the great doors closed behind them, Amy looked at her captain with concern. "What do we do now, sir?" Jake stared at the door for a long moment, thinking about the long journey back to Earth and the billions of people waiting for news about their future among the stars. "We go home," he said finally, "and we figure out how to do this without them." Dr. Helen Shaw sat in her laboratory aboard the council monitoring station, staring at the blank screen in front of her. For 6 months now, the communications array had picked up nothing from human space. No radio signals, no data transmissions, no requests for trade negotiations. Nothing but silence. This worried her more than she cared to admit. In the 3 years since first contact, humans had been the most talkative species the Council had ever encountered. They sent messages constantly, sharing everything from scientific discoveries to something they called music videos. Their communication networks buzzed with activity day and night, creating a steady background noise that the Council's monitoring systems had grown accustomed to. Now, there was nothing. Helen pulled up the last recorded transmission from Earth, dated exactly 6 months. And 3 days ago, it was Captain Morrison's final message to the Council, broadcast on a delayed signal that had reached them long after the human delegation had returned home. "We asked for partnership. You offered servitude. We asked for respect. You gave us condescension. Humanity has chosen another path. We leave not in anger, but in disappointment. The stars are vast, and we will find our own way among them." At the time, most council members had dismissed it as the bitter words of a defeated species. Chancellor Zecto had actually laughed when the message played during their next session. But Helen had studied humans longer than anyone else on the council, and she knew they didn't make empty threats. She switched her screen to the visual monitoring system, pulling up images from the automated probes that kept watch on human space. What she saw made her stomach drop. Earth looked normal from a distance. The blue and green planet still spun in its orbit, still had clouds swirling across its surface. But when she zoomed in closer, something was wrong. The night side of the planet, which should have been blazing with the lights of 12 billion people, was dark. Not completely dark, but darker than it had ever been since humans had developed electric lighting. Mars was even worse. The dome cities that had housed millions of colonists were still there, but the lights inside them were dim and flickering. The orbital stations that had buzzed with constant traffic now drifted silent in space. Helen quickly pulled up readings from the other 17 human colonies. One by one, she checked each world, and the story was the same everywhere. The cities were still there, the buildings intact, but the signs of life were fading fast. "Computer," she said aloud, "run a population analysis on all human territories." The computer hummed for several minutes before responding in its calm, electronic voice. "Analysis complete. Current estimated human population in monitored territories, 400 million. Previous population estimate, 12.7 billion. Margin of error plus or minus 50 million. Helen's hand shook as she gripped the edge of her desk. 12 billion people didn't just disappear. Where had they gone? She tried calling up the shipping records, looking for signs of mass transportation or refugee movements. The last recorded ship movements in human space was 6 months ago, right around the time the communications went silent. But those records showed hundreds of ships leaving human territory, carrying what appeared to be entire planetary populations. "Where did they go?" she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, far beyond the edge of council space, Admiral Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching as the last group of transport ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The sight before her was something that would have been impossible to imagine. Just 1 year ago, spread across the star system were hundreds of ships of every size and description, massive colony vessels that could house 1 million people each, converted cargo haulers packed with equipment and supplies, scientific research ships loaded with everything from university libraries to entire hospitals, even old military vessels that had been refitted to carry families and their belongings. "Admiral," came a voice from her communications officer, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Bell. "The Mars group has just arrived. That's the last of them. All 67 colony ships are now in the fleet." Lisa nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and amazement. They had actually done it. In 6 months, they had evacuated the entire human population from council space without anyone noticing until it was too late. "What's our final count, Ryan?" she asked. 12.3 billion souls, ma'am. We had to leave behind about 400 million automated systems and artificial intelligences to maintain basic operations and make it look like the colonies were still inhabited. But every living human is now part of the fleet. Lisa looked out at the massive collection of ships surrounding them. The logistics of moving so many people should have been impossible, but humans had always been good at doing impossible things when they had to. The plan had started forming the moment Captain Morrison returned from his meeting with the council. If the galactic community wasn't willing to give humans room to grow, then humans would find their own room. The outer galaxy was vast, full of unexplored star systems that no council species had ever claimed. Dr. Kate Williams, Earth's leading astrophysicist, had spent months calculating jump routes through unexplored space. Her team had identified dozens of systems that could support human life, all of them far enough from council territory that no one would bother to look for them. "Dr. Williams," Lisa called out, "are we ready for the next phase?" Kate looked up from her navigation console, her face tired but determined. "All routes are calculated and verified, Admiral. We've got 17 different destination systems picked up, each one capable of supporting multiple colonies. The quantum beacons are ready to deploy, and the terraforming equipment has been distributed among the fleet, and our technological upgrades." Kate smiled for the first time in months. That's the best part. Without the Council's technology restrictions and safety protocols slowing us down, our research teams have made breakthroughs we never thought possible. The new atmospheric processors can terraform a world in 5 years instead of 50. Our fusion reactors are 3 times more efficient than anything we had before. And the new ship designs, she gestured toward her screen, which showed blueprints for vessels unlike anything in human history. Lisa studied the designs with interest. The ships looked sleek and organic, more like living creatures than machines. How is this possible? We've only been working on these upgrades for 6 months. That's the thing about restrictions, Kate explained. Once you remove them, progress happens incredibly fast. For decades, we've been following council guidelines about safe research, practices, approved technologies, and acceptable development time. Without those limitations, our scientists and engineers have been able to think in ways we never could before. Ryan looked up from his station with excitement. Admiral, you should see what the biotechnology teams have accomplished. They've developed medical systems that can extend human lifespan by centuries. The agricultural departments have created crops that can grow in any environment. And the military research division. He paused, looking slightly overwhelmed. Ma'am, I think we might have accidentally created the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Accidentally. Well, we were just trying to develop better ways to protect the colony ships during the journey. But when you remove all the restrictions on weapons research and defensive systems, you end up with some pretty incredible results. The Admiral walked to the main viewing screen, looking out at the fleet that represented the entire future of the human race. In just 6 months, they had gone from being rejected petitioners to becoming something entirely new. They were no longer bound by council rules or limited by council expectations. Send the signal to all ships, she ordered. Begin the jump sequence. It's time to find our new home. As the fleet prepared to leap into unexplored space, Lisa thought about the council members who had dismissed humanity so casually. They probably assumed that humans had simply accepted their fate and gone back to their small corner of the galaxy. They were about to discover how wrong they were. One by one, the human ships vanished into the darkness between stars, carrying 12 billion people toward a future that no council species could have imagined. Behind them, they left only empty cities and silent worlds, along with a mystery that would soon shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The humans were gone, and no one knew where they had went. Commander Tethma had been flying scout missions for the Vorthok military for over 30 years, but he had never seen anything like what appeared on his ship's sensors as he approached the Kepler system. According to his star charts, this region of space contained nothing but dead rocks and gas clouds. The system had been surveyed 200 years ago and marked as completely lifeless. But his instruments were telling him a very different story. Navigation officer, he called out to his second-in-command, confirm our position. Are we definitely in the Kepler 442 system? Lieutenant Vacheron checked his readings twice before responding. Yes, Commander, we are exactly where we should be. But, sir, these energy signatures don't match anything in our database. Tethmore looked at the main viewing screen as his ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. What he saw made his scales shift to the deep purple color that indicated shock. Among his species, the system was alive with activity. Massive orbital stations surrounded the fourth planet, their lights twinkling like jewels against the black of space. Ships moved between the stations in organized patterns, carrying cargo and passengers with the efficiency of a well-established trade network. But it was the planet itself that truly amazed him. 2 years ago, this world had been a frozen ball of rock with no atmosphere to speak of. Now it glowed with the blue and green colors of a living world. Clouds swirled across continents where cities sparkled with electric lights. Even from this distance, he could see the geometric patterns of agricultural areas and the straight lines of roads and settlements. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the planet. Put it through, Tethmer ordered, his voice tight with confusion and growing alarm. The voice that came through the speakers was speaking in perfectly clear galactic standard, with just a slight accent that Tethmer recognized but couldn't quite place. Unknown vessel, this is Kepler Control. Please identify yourself and state your business in this system. Tethmar's jaw dropped. He knew that accent now. It was human, but that was impossible. Humans didn't have the technology for this kind of terraforming. It should have taken them centuries to transform a dead world into something livable. Kepler control, he replied. Carefully, this is Commander Tethmar of the Vorthok scout ship Vigilant. We are conducting a routine survey of this system. There was a pause before the human voice responded. Commander, this system is now under human jurisdiction. We appreciate your interest, but we must ask you to state your intentions clearly. Human jurisdiction, Tethmar repeated, looking at his crew with growing bewilderment. I'm sorry, but our records show this system as unclaimed territory. Your records are 2 years out of date. Commander, would you like to speak with our administrator? I'm sure she would be happy to explain the situation. Before Tethmar could respond, another voice came through the comm system. This one belonged to a human female, and she spoke with the kind of confidence that came from being completely in control of a situation. Commander Tethmar, this is Administrator Susan Blake. Welcome to New Eden, the first independent human colony outside Council space. Tethmar felt his legs go weak. He had to sit down in his command chair to steady himself. Administrator Blake, I'm afraid there's been some mistake. Humans don't have the technology for this kind of colonial development. Commander, Susan's voice carried a hint of amusement. I think you'll find that human technology has advanced considerably in the past 2 years. Would you like a tour of our facilities? I promise you'll find it educational. Against his better judgment, Tethmar found himself accepting the invitation. An hour later, he was standing in what the humans called the Central Administrative Complex, staring out through massive windows at a city that shouldn't have been able to exist. The buildings rose from the landscape like something out of a dream, their walls made of materials that seemed to shift and change color depending on the angle of the light. Streets moved in gentle curves between structures that looked more grown than built. Gardens and parks were everywhere, filled with plants from dozens of different worlds, all thriving together in the artificial atmosphere. How was all Tethmar could manage to say? Administrator Blake was a middle-aged human female with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She looked exactly like the kind of person who might run a small farming community, not the leader of an impossible technological miracle. It's actually quite simple once you remove the artificial limitations, she explained, leading him through the complex. For decades, humans followed council guidelines about acceptable terraforming methods, approved atmospheric processes, and safe development timelines. When we decided to do things our own way, we discovered that most of those guidelines were completely unnecessary. She stopped at a large window that looked out over the city's industrial district. Tethmar could see machines that defied everything he knew about physics, converting raw materials into finished products at speeds that should have been impossible. Your atmospheric processes, he said, struggling to understand what he was. Seeing how fast do they work? These new models can transform a dead world's atmosphere in about 6 months. Susan replied casually. The old council-approved models would have taken us 50 years to accomplish the same thing. 6 months? Tethmar's voice cracked. That's impossible. It violates at least 12 different laws of physics. Susan smiled. Only if you accept the council's interpretation of those laws. Our scientists discovered that most of the restrictions were based on outdated theories and overly cautious safety margins. When you're willing to think outside traditional boundaries, you can accomplish remarkable things. She led him to another section of the complex, where he could see through transparent walls into laboratories filled with equipment he didn't recognize. Human scientists worked alongside machines that seemed to bend reality around them. We've also made significant advances in energy generation, Susan continued. Our fusion reactors produce about 10 times more power than anything in the council databases, and our matter conversion systems can transform any element into any other element with nearly perfect efficiency. Tethmar felt dizzy. What he was seeing challenged everything he thought he knew about the limits of technology. How many systems like this do you have? New Eden was our first colony, Susan admitted, but we've established settlements in 37 systems so far. Each one is developing its own specialties. The Centauri colonies focus on advanced manufacturing. The Vega settlements are working on biotechnology. The Sirius system has become our main research and development center. 37 systems, Tethma repeated weakly. In 2 years, well, we had a lot of people to relocate and a strong motivation to succeed, Susan said with a shrug. When the council made it clear that we weren't welcome in their territory, we decided to create our own territory. As they continued the tour, Tethmar saw marvels that would have been considered impossible just 2 years ago. Humans had developed transportation systems that moved people and goods at near light speed without using traditional faster-than-light technology. Their medical facilities could apparently heal injuries and cure diseases that council medicine considered untreatable. Their agricultural systems produced more food per acre than any known farming method. But perhaps most impressive was their construction technology. Tethmar watched in amazement as human workers directed machines that could build entire city blocks in a matter of hours. The structures they created were not only functional, but beautiful, designed to work in harmony with the planet's natural environment, Commander Susan said, as they reached the end of the tour. I hope you'll take a message back to the council for us. What message? Tethmar asked, still struggling to process everything he had seen. Tell them that humanity thanks them for their rejection. Being forced to develop independently was the best thing that could have happened to us. We've accomplished more in 2 years of freedom than we might have in 2 centuries under council oversight. As Tethmar prepared to leave, he realized that everything had changed. The humans weren't the primitive species that the council had dismissed. They had become something entirely new, something that the galaxy had never seen before, and they were just getting started. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 6 hours, and Chancellor Zekdal could feel his ancient bones aching from sitting in his chair for so long. But the reports kept coming in, each one more disturbing than the last. Dr. Helen Shaw stood at the center of the chamber, her usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled excitement and fear. Around her, holographic displays showed star charts covered in red markers, each one representing a confirmed human presence. The Tau Ceti system now contains 17 inhabited worlds, she reported, her voice echoing in the vast hall. Our energy scanners detect power generation levels that exceed anything in our databases. The humans appear to have developed fusion, technology that operates at efficiencies we considered theoretically impossible. Queen Zerish clicked her mandibles in agitation. 17 worlds in one system. How is this possible? It should take centuries to terraform even one world properly. According to our analysis, Helen continued, the humans are not terraforming in any traditional sense. They appear to be creating entirely new ecosystems, using technology we don't understand. They're building worlds from scratch. The crystalline being from Andromeda Station flickered with what the translation system interpreted as disbelief. Show us the evidence, it demanded. Helen activated a new hologram, this one showing detailed scans of a planet in the Proxima Centauri. Sister, the world spun slowly in the air above them, revealing continents that formed perfect geometric patterns and oceans that shimmered with an unnatural blue-green color. This planet didn't exist 3 months ago, Helen announced. Our long-range sensors detected the construction process. The humans built it using some kind of matter manipulation technology. They literally created a world out of raw materials from the system's asteroid belt. The council chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the translation devices. Chancellor Zekto stared at the impossible planet, trying to understand what he was seeing. That's not possible, he said finally. No species has that kind of power. Even we cannot create planets. The evidence suggests otherwise, Helen replied. And this is just one example. We've now confirmed human presence in over 60 star systems. They're not just colonizing existing worlds. They're reshaping entire systems to meet their needs. The energy being from Proxima 7 pulsed with alarm. Our own territory borders several of these human systems. Have they made any aggressive moves toward Council space? None, Helen admitted. In fact, they seem to be deliberately avoiding contact with us. But, Chancellor, there's something else you need to see. She activated another display, this one showing a massive fleet of ships unlike anything in the Council's databases. The vessels were sleek and organic-looking, their hulls seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal. They moved through space in perfect formation, their energy signatures so powerful that the monitoring equipment had trouble measuring them accurately. This fleet appeared at the edge of council space 2 days ago, Helen explained. They made no aggressive moves, sent no threatening messages. Instead, they broadcast a single transmission to every world in our territory simultaneously. Simultaneously, Queen Zerish repeated. How did they bypass our communication networks? We don't know. Their signals somehow reached every council world at exactly the same time, regardless of distance or communication barriers. The technology required for that kind of transmission is beyond our understanding. Chancellor Zecto felt a chill run down his spine. Play the message. The chamber filled with the voice of Captain Jake Morrison, the same human who had stood in this very room 3 years ago asking for permission to colonize a few empty worlds. But something had changed in his voice. Where once there had been hopeful respect, now there was quiet confidence and unmistakable authority. To the Galactic Council, the message began. We have returned not as supplicants, but as equals. 3 years ago, you dismissed us as primitive children. Today, we offer you the chance to join us as partners in exploring the true potential of galactic civilization. The message continued, but Chancellor Zecto barely heard the words. He was staring at the data displays that accompanied the transmission, showing technological specifications that made his head spin, faster than light travel that didn't rely on hyperspace lanes. Matter converters that could transform any element into any other medical technology that had apparently eliminated death from disease and aging. Energy weapons that could destroy entire fleets without leaving any trace of wreckage. But it was the final part of the transmission that truly shook him. We don't seek conquest, Morrison's voice continued. We seek cooperation. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to thrive, but only if we work together without the artificial barriers that have held galactic civilization back for millennia. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Dr. Helen Shaw pulled up another display, this one showing detailed analysis of the human fleet. Our best estimate suggests that a single one of their ships could defeat our entire combined naval force. But they're not threatening us. They're offering to teach us. Teach us! The crystalline being scoffed. What could they possibly teach us that we don't already know? Helen smiled grimly. According to the data they transmitted, quite a lot. They've included scientific papers showing breakthrough discoveries in every field imaginable. Physics, biology, chemistry, engineering, medicine. Most of it is so advanced that our scientists can barely understand the basic concepts. She activated one more display, this one showing a comparison chart. On one side were the technological achievements of the Council over the past 1,000 years. On the other side were human advances from the past 3 years. The difference was staggering. In 3 years, humanity had progressed further than the Council had in a millennium. Ha! Chancellor Zecto whispered. A new voice answered him, coming from the chamber's communication system. It was calm, professional, and undeniably human. Because you taught us the most valuable lesson of all, the voice said. You taught us that the only limitations that matter are the ones we place on ourselves. Security alarms began sounding throughout the chamber as council guards realized that their communication network had been compromised. But the human voice continued without interruption. Chancellor Zecto, this is Dr. Patricia Foster, Chief Science Officer of the Human Cooperative. I'm speaking to you from our flagship, currently positioned just outside your sensor range. Impossible, Zecto snarled. Our security systems cannot be breached. Your security systems are based on 1,000-year-old encryption methods. Dr. Foster replied with what sounded like gentle amusement. We've developed quantum communication technology that makes traditional security measures obsolete. But don't worry, we're not here to harm you. The main viewing screen activated, showing the interior of what appeared to be a human starship. But this wasn't like any ship the Council had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The air itself shimmered with energy fields that served purposes the Council couldn't begin to guess. Standing in the center of it all was a human female with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that even the ancient council members found themselves respecting. 3 years ago, you told us we were too young, too primitive, too dangerous to be trusted with new worlds, Dr. Foster said. You were partially right. We were young, but youth brings advantages that age sometimes forgets. She gestured, and the screen filled with images of human colonies, research stations, and technological marvels that defied everything the council thought they knew about the limits of science. We didn't have thousands of years of tradition telling us what was impossible, she continued. We didn't have bureaucratic committees deciding which research was too dangerous to pursue. We didn't have ancient prejudices limiting our imagination. What we had was freedom. Freedom to think, to experiment, to fail, and to break through in ways you never allowed yourselves to imagine. Chancellor Zekto stared at the screen, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of the council's mistake. They hadn't just rejected humanity's request for colonies. They had accidentally given humanity the greatest gift possible, the motivation to surpass them all. The council chamber had never been so quiet. For 3 days, the representatives from 12 species had argued, debated, and sometimes shouted at each other about what to do with the human problem. But now, as Captain Jake Morrison materialized, in the center of the chamber without using any visible transportation method, everyone fell silent. Chancellor Zekto gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his claws left scratches in the ancient metal 3 years ago. This same human had stood in this same spot, asking politely for permission to colonize empty worlds. Now he appeared before them like some kind of wizard from the old stories, his body shimmering into existence as if he had stepped through the fabric of space itself. Morrison looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago, except for his eyes. Those same brown human eyes now held a depth of knowledge and confidence that made even the eldest council members feel young and foolish. Chancellor, Morrison said, nodding respectfully to the lizard-like being. Queen Zerish honored representatives. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. We didn't agree to anything, Zekto snarled, his yellow eyes blazing with anger and fear. You simply appeared here without permission. How did you bypass our security systems? Morrison smiled, the expression somehow both gentle and terrifying. The same way we bypassed your limitations on scientific progress, Chancellor. We stopped accepting that something was impossible just because you said it was. Dr. Helen Shaw, who had been watching from her observer's seat, stood up and addressed the chamber. Honored Council, I believe we need to listen to what Ambassador Morrison has to say. Our situation has changed dramatically. Ambassador, Queen Zerish clicked her mandibles in confusion. He was a captain when we last saw him. I represent the Human Cooperative now, Morrison explained. 68 star systems, over 15 billion people, and more advanced technology than this galaxy has ever seen. But I'm not here to threaten you or to gloat about our success. He gestured, and the air around him filled with holographic displays, showing wonders that made the Council's greatest achievements look primitive. Cities that floated among the clouds of gas giants, massive structures that harvested energy directly from stars, ships that could travel instantly between galaxies. I'm here to offer you something that no one offered us 3 years ago, Morrison continued. A real partnership, a chance to grow beyond the limitations you've placed on yourselves. Chancellor? Zekto stood up, his full height making him tower over the human. You think you can come here and lecture us? We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We created the peace that all species enjoy. We built the trade networks that connect hundreds of worlds. And you've also created the stagnation that has kept galactic civilization from reaching its true potential, Morrison replied calmly. When did the Council last make a major scientific breakthrough? When did you last discover something that truly changed how people live? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Shaw cleared her throat and spoke up from her position near the wall. The last major breakthrough approved by the Council was the improved hyperspace navigation system, she said quietly. That was 800 years ago. Morrison nodded. 800 years. In 3 years, humanity has advanced further than this entire galaxy has in 8 centuries. Do you know why? The crystalline beam from Andromeda Station flickered with what might have been curiosity. Enlighten us, because you've been so focused on maintaining control that you forgot about progress, Morrison explained. Every new idea has to be approved by committees. Every research project has to follow safety guidelines written thousands of years ago. Every species has to stay within the boundaries you've set for them. He walked closer to the council seat, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Do you know what we discovered when we threw out all your rules? That most of them were completely unnecessary. The safety restrictions that limited our energy research were based on outdated theories. The development timelines that would have taken us centuries to complete projects were artificially extended to maintain the status quo. Queen Zeresh leaned forward in her seat. You're saying we deliberately held back progress? Not deliberately, Morrison admitted, but the effect was the same. You created a system where innovation was discouraged, where thinking outside established boundaries was considered dangerous, where young species were told to be patient and wait their turn. The energy beam from Proxima 7 pulsed with what? The translation system interpreted as understanding, and when we rejected your request for colonies, you accidentally gave us the greatest gift possible, Morrison finished. Freedom from your system. Freedom to think, to experiment, to fail, and to succeed without anyone telling us it couldn't be done. Chancellor Zecto S. Scales shifted to a deep purple color that indicated fear and confusion. What do you want from us? Morrison's expression softened. The same thing we wanted 3 years ago. Partnership. But now we're offering it from a position of strength, instead of asking for it from a position of weakness. He gestured again, and new holographic displays appeared, showing detailed plans for technologies that could benefit every species in the galaxy. Medical systems that could extend any creature's lifespan indefinitely. Terraforming equipment that could create perfect worlds in months instead of centuries. Energy sources that could power entire civilizations without depleting any natural resources. We could share all of this with you, Morrison said, but only if you're willing to abandon the system that has kept you trapped in the past. What are you proposing? Dr. Shaw asked, speaking for the entire council. The end of the Galactic Council as it currently exists, Morrison replied, and the beginning of something new. A galactic cooperative where every species contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs, where scientific research is encouraged instead of restricted, where young species are nurtured instead of dismissed. The chamber erupted in angry voices as council members shouted objections and concerns, but Morrison simply stood there, waiting patiently for the noise to die down. When silence returned, he spoke again. I know this is difficult to accept. You've ruled this galaxy for so long that you can't imagine any other way. But look around. Your own people are suffering from the limitations you've imposed. Your scientists spend their entire lives trying to solve problems that we've already fixed. Your worlds struggle with resource shortages while we've learned to create matter from pure energy. He pointed to the viewing screen, which now showed images of human colonies, where beings from dozens of different species worked together on projects. That defied imagination. This is what cooperation looks like when you remove artificial barriers, Morrison said. Former council species who chose to join us have made discoveries they never thought possible. The Vorthok engineers who designed our new starships. The crystalline beings who helped develop our quantum communication systems. Even some of the energy entities from Proxima 7 who taught us how to manipulate matter at the subatomic level. Chancellor Zecto felt the last of his authority crumbling around him. And if we refuse, Morrison's smile was sad but understanding. Then you'll continue on as you have for thousands of years, slowly falling further and further behind as the rest of the galaxy moves forward without you. We won't force anyone to join us, but we also won't let the old system hold back the species that want to grow. Dr. Shaw stood up again, this time addressing her fellow council members. Honored colleagues, I believe we have reached a turning point in galactic history. We can cling to our old ways and become irrelevant, or we can accept this opportunity to become something greater than we ever imagined. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone expected. 7 species chose to dissolve the council and join the human cooperative. 5 chose to maintain their independence and continue with the old ways as the chamber emptied and representatives departed to inform their homeworlds of the decision. Morrison found himself standing alone with Dr. Shaw, you know, she said thoughtfully, you could have simply conquered us. Your technology is so far advanced that we couldn't have stopped you. Morrison nodded. But that would have made us no better than the system we replaced. True strength isn't about dominating others. It's about lifting them up to reach their full potential. He looked around the ancient chamber one last time. The council taught us that 3 years ago, though I don't think they meant to. When they rejected us, they showed us what we didn't want to become. Closed-minded, afraid of change, more concerned with maintaining power than with growing and learning. As he prepared to leave, Morrison's final words echoed through the empty chamber. The greatest punishment for those who reject us isn't our anger. It's our success without them. And the greatest redemption is offering partnership despite past wrongs. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of the Galactic Cooperative had begun.